All right, let me tell you something exciting. We're in the perfect position for an absolutely massive rally in Q4. Chart analysts across the board are predicting one final parabolic move for Bitcoin that's going to send it screaming to brand new all-time highs. And here's where it gets really interesting. Once that happens, we're going to see profit taking that rotates straight into altcoins like XRP. Here's the key thing to understand. The higher Bitcoin climbs, the better it is for your altcoins. It's all connected. Now, speaking of markets, something pretty significant happened today. Both the S&P 500 and the Russell 2000, that's the small cap index, they both just hit fresh all-time highs. Yeah, today. Here's why this matters. We ultimately want to see even stronger performance from the Russell 2000 because that tells us people are willing to take on more risk. They're moving further out on the risk curve. And when that happens, altcoins always follow suit. Now look, I'll be honest, we do want to see more strength there than what we've seen so far. But here's the thing. It would be really unusual for the Russell 2000 to keep teasing new all-time highs multiple times, which it's been doing recently, only to completely fail and drop into a bear market. That's just not how this index typically behaves historically. My take? It's just teasing us right now before a full-blown breakout. And when that breakout comes, you know what follows. Altcoins. Look, there are so many reasons to be optimistic right now. The best part of this market cycle is still ahead of us before we finally hit that peak. I'm even seeing some chart analysts calling for XRP to reach $21 in this final massive rally. Can you imagine? Let me give you the current numbers. XRP is sitting just a stone's throw away from $3.04. Bitcoin's at $122,218. The 24-hour high for XRP hit $3.09, and Bitcoin touched $123,441. Folks, Bitcoin is literally knocking on the door of all-time highs right now. That is incredibly close.
Now look, nobody has a crystal ball here. Nobody knows for sure what's going to happen. But I'd be genuinely surprised if we don't see one final parabolic move for Bitcoin. Here's my reasoning. If that $124,000 all-time high we saw a couple months ago turns out to be the high for this entire cycle, that would be an unusually weak parabola to get Bitcoin to that level. It would be, it's not impossible, but it would be pretty peculiar. That's why it makes sense that almost 100% of the chart analysts I follow are convinced Bitcoin is going for one more leg higher. Check out this post from chart analyst Tony Severino. He says, "It looks like Bitcoin has chosen up as the direction in which to release all the pent-up volatility. We could be starting the grand finale of this cycle." And here's what I'll say about this. If he's right, if all these analysts are right about Bitcoin going up, this will be the final move. Now, even if you don't hold any Bitcoin and honestly don't care about it, that's totally fine. Actually, it's perfectly reasonable. Because let's be real here. We all know where the opportunity for life-changing wealth actually is. It's in altcoins. It's in XRP and all those other solid projects that have way less capital in them right now. That's where the real multipliers are. But here's the critical point. Even if you don't hold Bitcoin, you should want it to go as high as humanly possible. Why? Because the more money that flows into Bitcoin, the more money sloshes around in the entire crypto ecosystem. And that means XRP and all your other altcoins go higher too. That's exactly why you should be excited about what's happening with Bitcoin, even if you're not personally invested in it. Tony could absolutely be right about this. And honestly, this is what I keep seeing from almost every single chart analyst I follow. This thing is ready to go. Okay, check out this post from chart analyst Crypto Wizard. He's saying, "It's happening." There we go. $120,000 delivered. And this was just posted this afternoon at 1:50 p.m. Central Time. He points out that Bitcoin has been stuck in a range for 86 days, but it's now broken above $120,000. His call? The rally to $132,000 has officially begun. Bears are getting trapped, and we're already up over 15%. Now, even if Bitcoin peaks anywhere in that range, $140,000, $150,000, somewhere around there, that's going to give us more than enough momentum for XRP to go absolutely berserk and finally have that true face-melting rally we've been waiting for. the first one in over 8 years. Don't get me wrong, I'm thrilled that XRP has hit multiple all-time highs this year. That shows incredible strength. But here's the thing about history. The final leg for XRP is typically way more impressive than what happens during that initial surge, especially when you look at the actual dollar gains. So yeah, this past year has been a blast, especially since the election. It's been a wild ride. But here's what I genuinely believe is most probable. What's coming next is going to be even more stunning, and it's going to happen fast. If history rhymes with itself, and it usually does, this entire move will probably play out over just a few weeks. That's why when I see analysts calling for double-digit prices for XRP, I honestly won't be surprised at all if they end up being right. And hey, we'll find out together, won't we? Here's another post. This one from Credible Crypto. He shared this just a few hours ago at 2:58 p.m. Talking about Bitcoin, he says it went a bit lower but still held the higher low and does in fact look poetic AF on the weekly. So yeah, he's thinking it looks pretty darn good right here. He won't be surprised if this thing keeps climbing. Then there's this post from chart analyst Tara. I won't read the whole thing, but she's highlighting that there's a very good chance Bitcoin hits $130,800 on this next final wave up. Look, I'm not in the price prediction game myself. I don't know if that's where it's going to peak or if those analysts calling for $150,000 or even $170,000 for Bitcoin are correct. I don't pretend to have those answers. But what I am confident about, I'm on team this goes higher before it finally peaks. Now, could I be wrong? Absolutely. But I gotta tell you, and I'll say it again, I think it would be really peculiar if we had such a weak parabola and Bitcoin already peaked at just a little over $124,000. Usually this thing goes out with a massive bang. So if this time is different in that regard, okay, fine. But I'm skeptical. I think it's going higher. And then I think you're going to see the Russell 2000 go absolutely insane, and altcoins are just going to follow right behind. Check this out. Here's a post from Matt Hogan. He's the CIO at Bitwise, and he was just sharing some price predictions from major banks. Now, I don't put huge stock into what these big banks are saying necessarily, but I gotta tell you, it's still fascinating to see reputable banks from traditional finance calling for some absolutely monster Bitcoin price action. Get this. Citigroup is calling for Bitcoin to hit $133,000 by the end of this year. JP Morgan, they're calling for $165,000. And Standard Chartered is going even bigger, $200,000. Matt wrote, Q4 is going to be fun. So do I know which price prediction is right? Or if any of them are right? Nope. But I won't be surprised to see this thing go a lot higher from here. Now, there's this really interesting post from chart analyst Bobby A. He said, Bitcoin dominance rising as the price of Bitcoin rises at this stage is incredibly bullish for altcoins. And you know what? He's absolutely right. Bitcoin dominance going up while Bitcoin's price is also rising at this stage in the game? That's fantastic news for altcoins. Let me explain why this matters. If Bitcoin is still getting enough focus that it can push its dominance higher, and it has gone up slightly over the last week, that tells us something important. You can see it's sitting at 58.81% right now, after hitting a recent low closer to 57%. So we're talking about roughly a 1.5% increase. Here's the key. Seeing this happen while Bitcoin is surging, I mean, the whole market is surging, but Bitcoin is leading the charge. That means a boatload of money is flowing into Bitcoin right now. And I want that thing to go as high as humanly possible. Like I was saying just a couple minutes ago, the higher Bitcoin climbs, the more money sloshes through the rest of the crypto space. And ultimately, that hits XRP. That's exactly why Bobby is saying Bitcoin dominance rising, meaning it has a bigger percentage of the entire market, and Bitcoin's price rising at the same time this far into the cycle is incredibly bullish. He's saying that because he knows exactly what this means for altcoins. Way higher prices. The more money that flows in, the better it is for everyone. All right, take a look at this. Here's a post from Ryan Dietrich, and I've recently become a fan of this guy. Man, talk about someone who's data-driven. He's the chief market strategist at Carson Group. He wrote, Q4 has never been lower when the S&P 500 makes a new all-time high in the usually weak months of August and September, along with at least one in October. This bodes well for continued strength in 2025. Okay, let's break this down because this is fascinating stuff. When we look back at history, there's a very clear pattern that tends to play out in the stock market. Normally, August and September are considered weak months for the S&P 500. Yeah, they're often full of volatility and lots of chop, right? But here's where it gets interesting. In the rare years where the index actually makes new all-time highs in both August and September, October almost always sees new all-time highs too. And the outcome for the rest of the year, it's been remarkably consistent. You can see the data right there on your screen. In every single case since 1950 where this pattern has happened, the S&P 500 has gone on to finish the fourth quarter higher. Not sometimes, every time. On average, those Q4 returns come in at nearly 7%, which is a huge jump compared to the typical 4% gain in a normal year. The logic here is pretty straightforward. If the market is strong enough to push into record territory during months that usually give it trouble, that strength tends to carry over into the final stretch of the year. October alone has averaged solid gains in these situations, and then the momentum just keeps building into November and December. But here's what makes this even more compelling. The pattern has, listen to this, the pattern has never failed in history. Every single time this setup has occurred, the fourth quarter has finished positive. Zero exceptions. And guess what? In 2024, we're seeing the exact same setup playing out. Multiple new highs in August, more in September, and we've already logged a couple in October. So if history is any guide, and it usually is, this bodes very well for continued strength into the final months of the year. Now, here's why this matters for us. The crypto asset class moves in tandem with the stock market, so it makes perfect sense to believe we'll be seeing some serious fireworks in crypto land during the fourth quarter. That's definitely the way I see it, and this is exactly why I pay attention to data like this, historical performance data. It's just a matter-of-fact statement. Humans in similar situations tend to behave the same way they did previously. When you see a setup with lots of data points, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, getting up in that range. If you have that many examples going back half a century or more, you're looking at some pretty solid odds, right? Let me put it this way. If you're looking at a situation where, say, 9 out of 10 times the favorable thing happens, do you really want to bet against that? Now look, I'll acknowledge this. If you keep playing the odds, eventually you'll be wrong at some point. That's just reality. But so what? If you're wrong 10% of the time, okay, that one time happens and you're wrong. But what about the other 9 times when you're right? Isn't that more important? If you're just playing the odds and counting on history to rhyme with itself, that makes total sense. History does tend to rhyme with itself. Will you be wrong sometimes? Yes, I fully acknowledge that. Since I do count on this, I will be wrong sometimes. But I'm not expecting to be right 100% of the time. I'm expecting to be right in these types of situations the strong majority of the time, because history keeps rhyming with itself. Unless there's some fundamental shift we need to account for, history will keep rhyming. And if you just bet on those odds, you won't always be right. You'll be wrong sometimes. But most of the time, you'll be right. And that's what matters. Crypto follows along with this pattern, which is exactly why I took a few minutes to share all this with you. This stuff matters. All right, here's a post from chart analyst Dom. XRP attempting to regain the all-time high VWAP after 2 months of rejection. Flipping this area to support should trigger a run to $3.30. Well, at the time we're recording this, it's still looking pretty darn good. He posted this at 11:24 a.m. and we're still in a similar price range. So you might see an even bigger jump from XRP if it can hold here. Now, of course, if Bitcoin rolls back to the downside, and it's always possible, don't expect fireworks from XRP anytime soon. The asset class moves together, remember? But if this level can be sustained, oh boy, buckle up, my friends. Here's another post, this one from chart analyst Greg Crypto. XRP, the chasm. As of today, the price of touching the chasm, that's the green trend line he's labeled the chasm, is $10.30. As time goes on, the price of the chasm continues to rise. Only few and patience truly gets it. So what he's saying is, the further this goes out in time, if this trend line is to be believed, and he's certainly confident in it, then when XRP finally breaks through, if it takes a little longer, the price will just be that much higher when it touches that crucial trend line. And getting into double-digit price action, that's not remotely crazy, folks. That's why all these analysts I follow, and by the way, they pretty much all accurately called XRP breaking out this cycle, so they've got a solid track record. Every single one of them is either heavily predicting we'll get into double-digit price territory for XRP, or at the very least acknowledging there's a very real possibility we hit $10. Those would be the more conservative predictions, like from the blockchain backer, for example. He's talking more in the $8 to $10 range. And you know what? He could be right. It's totally possible the more conservative estimate is correct. It's also possible the really high predictions are right. You know, the analysts I follow who are calling for over $30. Honestly, I think the truth is probably going to be somewhere in between. Now, that's not me making a price prediction. I'll admit, I don't know. But just based on what I see from these analysts, if you look at the extremes, given that they all have great track records, here's the thing. Whatever topic they're covering, it's usually not the extremes that play out. The truth generally falls somewhere in between. Does that mean it can't be the extremes? No, it absolutely can. I'm just saying, anywhere in that range, whether it's on the lower end or the higher end, I think that's going to result in a ton of people listening right now being ridiculously happy and enjoying life-changing wealth. So I'll be thrilled with any of those outcomes. And I hope you guys will be too. Check out this post from Mikey Bull Crypto. XRP USD chart. XRP to $21 in this final massive rally. At least my conservative targets are $6 to $10. Anything is possible in crypto. So he does have some bare minimums in that $6 to $10 range, but he's now seriously looking at a price surge to $21 per XRP. This type of thing happens in crypto, folks. Don't think it can't happen to you. That's a defeatist attitude, and it's not in line with logic. Do I know if this is going to happen? Number. But is it unreasonable to believe it's absolutely within the realm of possibility? Not at all. This stuff happens in crypto all the time, especially when you get to the end of a market cycle and pure euphoria kicks in. Here's Chart Nerd, and I love this. He just keeps insisting on the same thing over and over again, which I actually appreciate. He's being very consistent here. XRP, few understand, $15 and then $27 is programmed. So he's one of the analysts thinking it'll get closer to that upper range, and it's certainly possible. But here's my question. Even if it were just $15, wouldn't most of you listening be absolutely thrilled? I mean, unless you're brand new to XRP, and if you are, maybe your expectations are even higher. But I think tons of you have been around for years. You've been buying around 20, 30, 40, 50 cents, right? If this thing goes to $15, come on, that's going to be so life-changing for so many of you listening. Oh, it'll be life-changing for me too. Now, I'm not going to lie. I'm probably not going to sell much, if any, of my XRP at that high. Here's why. It will have been too great of an opportunity for me not to have already sold lower. Let me explain my personal strategy. I took on greater risk upfront by buying more XRP than most normal humans would be willing to purchase over a span of years. I did that specifically so I'd feel comfortable exiting at lower price levels. That was my strategy from the beginning. So I'll be exiting at lower price levels. I'll be selling most of my XRP, if not all of it, between $5 to $8. That's just me personally. Does that mean I don't think it can go higher? No! I'll admit, I don't know where it'll top out, but I don't think those higher predictions are crazy at all. Just because I'm selling lower doesn't mean I'm bearish on XRP big picture. I want to illustrate that sentiment clearly. But here's the reality. Eventually, we will be back in a bear market.
And when that happens, I'm going to buy a metric ton of XRP again. When we're back in bear market territory and XRP craters to wherever it's going to crater after popping really high, I'll still be running this channel. I'm going to do this whole thing again. Why? Because XRP is an obvious, clear winner, an early winner of the crypto space. The utility for XRP has never been higher than it is right now. Yeah, I'm going to keep betting on that horse. Here's a post from Galaxy. XRP 300 days of consolidation below previous all-time high looks primed for a breakout. So, yet another analyst here expecting this thing to absolutely rocket to the upside, hit new all-time highs, and get into that face-melting territory. He's been very consistent on that point as well. Then there's this from chart analyst Zoom. XRP rejected from point of interest twice. Once broken, a move to $3.30 zone would likely be a quick one. So, it can move fast here, folks. Just keep watching. But here's what I genuinely believe. The best is yet ahead. We are not done with this market cycle. Now, even if Bitcoin has actually topped, and look, it's possible, I'm just not counting on that, but even if it did, we'd still get alt season. I just want Bitcoin to go higher so that alt season becomes even more ridiculous.